Welcome. Hi. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Leah Elwell, and I am with Invasive Species Action Network. We are a nonprofit organization that works to prevent the human-caused spread of invasive species. And today, our lesson, we're going to look at being a responsible pet owner, and which is really a great example of how we can understand better one of the important ways that we can prevent the introduction of and spread of invasive species. So we're going to cover a couple topics here. We're going to look at specifically how pets can become an invasive species, and then what being a responsible pet owner can look like. So let's dive right in here. Well, over 85 million people in the United States have pets. So that consequently means we have a lot of pets in the United States, which is a big reason why Invasive Species Action Network is working on this idea of being responsible pet owners. So I want to ask a question first, but who has a pet? I'm guessing many of you listening to this lesson today have some kind of pet at home, or at least know a friend that has a pet as well. So it could be a cat or a lizard or any number of fun things that could be in an aquarium, fish or turtles, or even lots of people have dogs as well. So, but those of you that have a pet, you know very clearly that there's several things, many things that we might do. We might have a list of things we have to do to take care of our pet. So we make sure that they have food and water, they have a safe place to stay. We might exercise them if we need to. We make sure they get to the vet. We clean up after them. So we know there's quite a few things that we do to take care of our pet. And all those things together make a responsible pet owner when we do that, when we're taking good care of our pets. But sometimes, as a pet owner, people find that they may not be able to take care of a pet any longer. And there have been times when people simply release a pet into the wild. But there are consequences or things that happen when pets are released like this. And we want to talk about, of course, what those things are and why we don't want to do them. So this is just an example here of, you might see this nice body of water and think, oh, this is a great place to put my fish. I can't take care of it. But the reality is, the sad thing is that they just may not survive when we release our fish or other pet into the wild like this. They could get eaten by another animal. They may not survive the winter. So really, it's not very humane to actually release a pet either, just because it may not survive. But there's another consequence, another thing that can happen when you release a pet. And that is that it does survive and it can become an invasive species. So let's touch on briefly here what exactly, when I say invasive species, what exactly am I talking about? So this is taking a particular species, a new species, and introducing it into an area where it hadn't previously been before. And when it's introduced, it causes some type of harm. So the special definition, of course, it causes ecological or economic harm. And what that means, what some examples of ecological or economic harm could be, that it destroys habitat, it eats native plants or animals, and also that it can spread diseases. So invasive species are clearly what we do not want to create invasive species with the release of a pet. So let's take a look at why. So what happens? What are those impacts when pets have been, or other aquarium things have been released? So here's just an example of what has happened when an aquatic plant was released. And this is a water body that used to be open and available for people to go swimming or boating and fishing. And now all you can see, all these little tiny green parts of the plant poking up, they are just absolutely covering this area, so we can't do any activities there. So they've really shifted what we can do in terms of activity, and they've also impacted the native fish and plants that live in that area. Another really recognizable release of a pet that you might have heard of before is the release of snakes. And the Florida Everglades area, so that southern tip of Florida, has really been impacted by this. So unfortunately, some pet snakes were either released or got out and have caused huge impacts. So what scientists have discovered here in looking at the mammals and birds that live in the Everglades, it's now we have way fewer native mammals and birds than we had previous to the release of some of these very predatory snakes. So things like bobcats and raccoons and all the native birds, there's way fewer of them because they are being consumed in large numbers by these gigantic snakes. And for good reason. These snakes are very good at hiding. Once they've gotten out into the wild, they're really difficult to find. They're really difficult to catch. In the center of this image here, there's a snake that's blending in just perfectly. So sadly, once they're out there, they're just really, really hard to find. Another really recognizable pet is, of course, the goldfish. Goldfish are a great creature to keep in your aquarium at home, and but sometimes you just can't keep them. And that what's happened is people have released them, and this is what happens when they come. If you were to come back and look for it, it would be this gigantic fish, and this gigantic fish has impacts on that water body that it's now living in. It degrades the habitat there, and it also competes with the native fish. So unfortunately, while this happy goldfish survived, it's having huge impacts on all the native um, creatures that are there. So I hope these few examples you've been able to see that releasing a pet has a really bad impact on the native species that are there. And being a responsible pet owner is the right thing to do. So we kind of add it to our list of how to make sure we're taking care of our pet properly. And if there's any reason that you can no longer care for a pet, there's some really simple things that you can do to make sure that you're still that responsible pet owner. First, you're going to find a new home for that pet. And there's a couple of places that you can go ask. First, you could ask friends or family or neighbors, are they able to take your pet for you? If that doesn't work, contact your local pet shelter. And then also your local pet store can also be hugely helpful. They are connected to all kinds of different pet owners and maybe just the folks to help you find a new home for your pet. So please make sure you reach out and find a new home for your pet. That is the don't let it loose thought. Same with those aquatic plants. If for some reason you need to be getting rid of everything in your aquarium, those aquatic plants too need to go. Maybe if you can find a home for them, that would be great. If you can't, make sure you put them in the trash. So put them in their own plastic bag and put them in the trash that goes out on a weekly basis. So thanks for joining me today. And I want you guys to remember to don't let it loose, and please take the steps that you need to help find a new home for that pet if you can no longer care for it. If you want to learn more about the Don't Let It Loose program, you can visit us online at don'tletitloose.com. If you want to learn more about invasive species and to do some neat activities that are related to the Don't Let It Loose program, you can go to stopais.org. Thanks for joining us.